The New York Giants have approximately $43 million in salary cap room as they'll be going into free agency in just a short couple of weeks. So we thought that tonight we'd talk about the best free agents that the Giants have signed during the salary cap era, because perhaps history will repeat itself this year. We'll talk about it on the Big Blue Breakdown live, coming your way right now. Hello again, everybody. I'm Paul Dottino. So glad you could join us tonight for the Big Blue Breakdown live here as part of the New York Giants on SI, YouTube page, and media network. Yeah, we saw the Philadelphia Eagles just pummel the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl on Sunday, just like you folks did. We all saw the game. I mean, I think they had a record television audience once again, as the Super Bowl just seems to continuously drive eyeballs to the television screen. I get it. It was not a game that most Giants fans, I think, were very interested in, but we all had to watch anyway because it's what we do. And what did we see? Well, we saw Philly totally dominate Kansas City. And if you'd like, we could talk about that game later on in this program. We could talk about what the Giants need to do to close the gap between them and Philadelphia. We could talk specifically about some of the things that they did that you'd like to see the Giants do during the 2025 season. But tonight, the opening theme of this show, as we already hinted to you during the teasers that we posted on Twitter, is the Giants' top 10 free agent signings during the salary cap era. Now, you may or may not remember, depending upon your age or how much you paid attention to the legalities of the National Football League over the years. The salary cap was installed following the 1993 season, going into 1994. So the 94 season, which was the second season of Dan Reeves' tenure with the New York Giants, that's the first one that the league had to operate under the salary cap. Okay? It changed the complexion of everything in the NFL. It just did. You know, you had the antitrust people that got involved saying that free agency and Plan B was a problem with the antitrust laws, and they forced the NFL to scrap Plan B free agency, which I always thought was the best form of free agency to help keep the quality of the game at a higher level. Be that as it may, it was ruled an antitrust violation and they opened up free agency. But to do that, they also installed a salary cap. Okay, so let's go back to the offseason between 93 and 94. The salary cap is installed, and now every team has to operate under a brand new climate. Now, over the course of time, we're talking, it's 30 plus years since the cap first came into being. So I decided that in putting this list together, because the Giants are going to be active in free agency this year, they're going to be active on the trade market and free agency, and they're going to make at least a couple of big splashes. And one of them I anticipate is going to be for a quarterback. So I thought it was a good idea. You know, I'm not saying that the QB they get is going to be a free agent or through a trade, but it's going to be through one of them. I think it's pretty obvious as we get closer and closer to March. So I thought it'd be a good idea just to look at the history of the Giants organization in the salary cap era to show you guys how successful the Giants have been in signing free agents, because they've signed a slew of really, really good ones over the years. Now, some also went bad. But here's the exercise as I outlined it for myself, because, you know, before I do a show like this, I set the rules and the parameters, then I put myself through them to come up with the list of who should be the top 10. So the parameters are as follows, and I'll read this to you because I made the parameters, then I had to follow them. What I decided was this was based on the player's overall tenure with the Giants after they signed with New York as a free agent. So it's not based on one spectacular year or two spectacular seasons. No, 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 no. We're talking about a veteran player who was available in the free agent market, who signed with the Giants, and however long he played with the Giants, we're going to give a value to that tenure with Big Blue. Okay, so for example, Kurt Warner is not going to be part of this. Why? He was with the Giants for only one season. I figured to make this a really fair fight amongst the players who would want to be on this list, I decided that it would only include players who were starters, okay, for at least 3+ seasons. Now, why do I say 3+? Well, because originally I decided they would have to be 4-year starters. But then I thought to myself, we got a problem here. Plexico Burress shot himself in the leg 2/3 of the way through his 4th season. And that's going to knock him off the list. And obviously, this list has to include Plexico Burress. So here's what I did. I decided that the list would only include veteran free agents. Remember, this means that Victor Cruz and Richie Seubert are off the list. They were undrafted rookie free agents. Okay, so they don't get on the list. These are veteran free agents who were at least 4-year starters for the Giants, with one asterisk, the exception being Plexico Burress, because in his 4th season with the Giants, he made it through 2/3 of the way before he shot himself in the leg and then missed the rest of the year. Interestingly enough, during Burress's time with the Giants, he had 1,000 yards in each of his first 3 full seasons with New York and was well on his way to doing it again in a 4th. His impact, his short-term impact for the Giants in his 3.5+ seasons was as impactful, and in reality, more impactful than any free agent that the Giants have signed. Now, he's going to make my list of the top 10, but because he only started for a little over 3.5 years and only got one Super Bowl ring, I'll give you a little hint. He's not going to be number 1 on my list. He's going to fall down several notches because there are other guys who gave the Giants more years as starters on more successful teams. So that's the way I approach this. And the other one who got a bit of an exemption was John Jerry. John Jerry also, between his years with the Giants, he missed 2 half seasons. He was with them actually for 5 years, started a bunch of games over those 5 years, but missed 2 half seasons with injury. So John Jerry also qualified for the list. In fact, there were a total of 22 players who signed as veteran free agents with the New York Giants and were starters with them for at least a 4-year period. So that gave me 22 players to work off of, and I had to come up with the top 10. Boy, this was fun. This was really fun. Now, as you folks know, I started covering the team in 1983. So I went back even further than that. I could have gone back 40 years, but I didn't think that was fair. I thought we would only do the salary cap era. So we reduced it to the last 32 years. Okay? So 31 years, I guess. So here we go through the list. And I'm going to go backwards, starting with number 10. And in the meantime, I just want to catch up on some of the tweets in the chat. And folks, if you'd like to join us, you can go into the chat. You could go to the link, do a video call if you prefer, or an audio call. I'd love to talk to you. I'm a talkative kind of guy. I've told you this before. I'm a paisan. I talk to people. That's what I really enjoy doing on this program. We don't get enough of people who want to talk. They rather type. Aiden Fink says, good evening. And I say good evening back to you. He called the Big Blue Kickoff Live show earlier today. John Morano says, hey, how's it going? I'm doing well, John. Good to speak with you again. Isaac says, how you doing, buddy? I'm good, Isaac. I hope you're doing as well, too. There's Christine, always a loyal viewer on our program, saying hi. Isaac Mars says he wants to get a hold of Matthew Stafford, please. Well, Matthew Stafford would have to be acquired in a trade because he's currently the property of the Los Angeles Rams. So do I think that would be awesome? Yeah. Let me make something clear, Isaac. Back in December, when I came to the conclusion, after a couple of months of studying things, it was early December, I came to the conclusion that of the free agent quarterbacks who would be available, Jimmy Garoppolo checked the most boxes for me. And as you know, either listening to this program or Big Blue Kickoff Live, I have been all over Jimmy Garoppolo as the guy who I would want the Giants to sign as the bridge quarterback. But see, since that time, the climate and the circumstances and the environment appeared to have changed. What has happened? Well, we heard last week that Russell Wilson, according to sources out of Pittsburgh, is likely not to return to the Steelers. Jay Glazer of Fox Sports in particular said that not only is Russell Wilson not going back to the Steelers, but he's also not going to sign with Pete Carroll and the Las Vegas Raiders, and that he has another team lined up. Well, folks, remember, Russell Wilson had made a pit stop to the Giants on his quick free agency tour before he went to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you know that the Giants think well of him. I think that means there's a real potential that he's in play. So now, from thinking he was going to be retained by Pittsburgh as they got into the playoffs, now he's kind of a guy you certainly would like to consider. And I would never try to pretend and tell you that he does not have a better resume than Jimmy Garoppolo, because he does. He actually has won a Super Bowl, which Jimmy Garoppolo has not. And certainly over the course of many, many years, Wilson has stayed healthier, been more durable, and put up incredible numbers. So Russell Wilson would absolutely be a bigger consideration than Jimmy Garoppolo. The other fellows that we seem to be hearing about, well, it sounds like Matthew Stafford is once again going to be on the trade block, as Adam Schefter of ESPN over the weekend came out and said that Stafford is in the talks with the Rams to potentially renegotiate his deal, because the Rams are not happy with his salary cap number, and they're going to try to reconfigure his contract. And if they can't, Schefter then said, it would get very sticky for Stafford, and then you now have to consider him as part of the potential trade market. Well, let's not kid ourselves, okay? Matthew Stafford has put up some pretty incredible numbers over the years. Now, you'd be foolish not to take a phone call on Matthew Stafford, okay? You'd have to make that phone call. Either take the phone call or make a phone call and check out Matthew Stafford, who at 36, 37 years old, did what he did this year to lead the Rams into the playoffs once again. We obviously know that the Giants reportedly have hired Coach Hall, an assistant quarterbacks coach, who is the brother-in-law of Matthew Stafford. So there's a family connection there. You know, you'd be foolish not to investigate Matthew Stafford because his resume certainly indicates that that would be a blockbuster. And a guy, if you bring him in here, you're probably bringing him in here for 2 to 3 years. He's not a one-year bridge. Even though he's in his upper 30s, he would be here for, I would think, on at least 2, probably a 3-year plan. So would I poo-poo Matthew Stafford and tell you that they should go after Jimmy Garoppolo? No. Actually, I would pivot very quickly and tell you that I would be very much in favor of going for a Matthew Stafford. I would certainly not poo-poo Russell Wilson. It remains to be seen if there are any other quarterbacks. We know that a lot of people believe that Kirk Cousins could potentially be on the market. And potentially Derek Carr could be on the market. These are rumblings we've heard for a while, but they haven't necessarily picked up steam. Now, if they do, well, again, due diligence. You got to check in on these guys. Carr, Cousins, Stafford, Wilson. They all have more impressive resumes than Jimmy Garoppolo. So if you're willing to pay more for a much better resume, then you've got to see what you could do about getting one of those other guys. If you've decided that you're not going to pay for a upscale, better resume, and you're still going to go to the bargain bin, well, then I still think Jimmy Garoppolo is the best one of the bargain bins available. But let me just make it clear, folks. The climate right now for the available quarterbacks seems to be changing as we speak, and there are better ones that apparently are becoming available. So I am certainly entitled to change my mind and go after one of those higher guys if I want to. So I don't want people to get all down on me and say, well, you said you wanted Jimmy Garoppolo. Well, I did under the circumstances that we knew for sure about a month ago, or 2 months ago for that matter. Those circumstances are now changing. And I, for one, do think that it's much more likely the Giants make a big splash at quarterback and don't necessarily take a one-year bridge, but go for a bigger fish as these names are starting to become more readily available. So we got that out of the way. I'll get to a couple of more of these chats before we get to this free agent list. Okay, Scott Young says, first I think of Antonio Pierce as one of the Giants' top 10 free agent signings in the salary cap era. Scott, I'll give you a little hint. Pierce did make the top 10. Iman Perry says, salute. I'm with you, my man. Back at you. Giants Carb Crush. Well, he's got somebody on the list. He's looking at linebacker Michael Barrow. Says he doesn't get talked about enough, but he was fantastic in his 4 seasons with the Giants. Well, you know what? Giants Carb Crush, I'm going to do you a solid because I'm going to go backwards on this list. And number 10 is linebacker Michael Barrow. Number 10 on my list. 4 years as a New York Giants starter. 2 trips to the playoffs and 1 trip to the Super Bowl 35, the 2000 season, when they did lose the big game and the Lombardi Trophy to the Baltimore Ravens. So Giants Carb Crush, I give you a big thumbs up because you're right. Michael Barrow is number 10 on my list of top 10 New York Giant free agents, veteran free agents signed during the salary cap era. Michael Barrow is number 10. Evan Perry says he came in, want to know what the list was. Well, you now know what the list is. Christine says she remembers Mike Barrow for sure. Isaac Mars says, can he opt out too? I think he's talking about Matthew Stafford. Well, let me take a look at Over the Cap's information on Michael Stafford's contract. Stafford does not have an opt-out or a voidable year in his contract. So no, the answer is he cannot opt out and become a free agent. He is now 37 years old. And if you want him, you're either going to have to work out a trade with the Los Angeles Rams or wait for them to make him a salary cap casualty and release him. Then he becomes a street free agent and can negotiate with any team in the entire league. Okay. Aiden says, Stafford's brother-in-law is our new assistant quarterbacks coach. Some speculation there, Paul. Could be a 3-year bridge, but don't know if you even consider him a bridge. What are you giving up? Well, Aiden, I don't think that Matthew Stafford is a bridge. I agree with you. I think if Matthew Stafford were to be dealt, I would think you bring him in as at least a 2-year starter, potentially 3. That's how I would see it. Now, it is entirely possible that you could bridge a guy for that long. You could. So if you drafted a quarterback this season, chances are you probably would take one on the second day. You certainly would not take one, I don't think, with the number 3 overall pick, because you're thinking that the guy's going to be more of a project than he is a prospect. And you would want to sit him behind Stafford for 25, probably 26, and not even give him an opportunity to see the field until 27. At least that's how I would play it if Matthew Stafford were to be dealt to my team. Now, I would say this. From everything that I've talked to, people I've talked to about the drafts, the quarterback class in 2026 is much deeper than the one in 2025. So, once again, you take a project in 2025, somebody in the 2nd or 3rd round, I don't know, maybe even go to the 4th, I don't know. And you don't worry about that guy necessarily making it, because if he doesn't make it, if the project shows something while he's sitting behind the veteran, and you're going to give him at least 2 years to sit on the bench in redshirt, you got plenty of time to develop that project. If the project doesn't develop, well, you take one of the deeper quarterbacks in the 2026 draft. And there's supposed to be plenty of them. So nothing wrong with that. Nothing lost, but a lot to gain, because you give yourself an out and the leeway of going to get another young guy if you feel as though the project that you may draft later on in 25 is not living up to potential. That's why signing a guy or acquiring a guy like a Matthew Stafford gives you a longer bridge, if you will. You can call him a bridge if you want to, but it's a much longer bridge. It's like the Golden Gate Bridge. It's not like the George Washington Bridge, which is a heck of a lot shorter. Or for that matter, the Cuomo Bridge or the Verrazano Bridge, whatever, the Tappan Zee. The Verrazano's pretty long too, but the old Tappan Zee, now the Cuomo Bridge upstate, that's a really long bridge. So there's less impetus to draft a first-round quarterback there and draft one lower who is more of a project. Now, it's a little different, for example, if you sign, let's say, a pending free agent. If Team X were to sign a Russell Wilson, chances are, I don't know, he just looks like he's a little bit more on the downside than Stafford does at this point in time. So you probably would not necessarily think you're going to get 2 to 3 years. You may, but I think the bet is more 1 to 2 years on a Wilson than it is a Stafford. I think Stafford's got a lot more gas in his tank than Russell Wilson does. But of course, Stafford's still under contract to the Rams, so you'd have to trade for him, at least at the moment, as opposed to a Wilson who is going to be a free agent. You won't have to give up any draft capital to get a Russell Wilson. So now, what are you giving up? Well, the team that's going to trade for Matthew Stafford, the first thing you got to figure out is where does he stand with the Rams on the renegotiation? Because that in itself is step one in the process. If they're able to renegotiate a deal with him, then he's staying with the Rams. And all of this chatter that's out there becomes simply a waste of time and useless noise pollution. If they cannot come to terms on a renegotiated deal, well, now, what kind of bind are the Rams in? They'll want to unload him. They're going to set up a price. But see, they'll probably do what they're doing with Cooper Kupp. They'll tell him, go out and see if you can find any trade partners. Those trade partners are probably also going to look at Stafford's contract and say, we'd like to redo your deal ourselves because we'd like to get your cap number down just a little bit. So now, much like the Giants did when they made the trade this past year, when they went after Brian Burns of the Carolina Panthers, so you get permission from the Rams to talk to the player, and then you got to find out if you can come to terms on a deal, on how he's willing to adjust his contract. And, knowing that the Rams have had him on the block, he's probably going to be more willing to come to terms on a renegotiation with a team outside the Rams than he will staying with the Rams, unless he's just really, really dying to stay there. Then you've got to go to the Rams and say, okay, we've got a deal worked out with the player. We know what we're going to do with his renegotiation. Let's talk about how we're going to deal with this draft capital and this trade that you're going to want to make with us. Now, of course, because Stafford will have already come to terms about the kind of renegotiation he's going to want to do with his new team, that gives you leverage against the Rams. Because, hey, Rams, you're trying to deal this guy. We got a way out for you. We've got a guy who's willing to come to us. We're willing to do business. Let's try to see what we could do about making this thing meet in the middle in terms of what it's going to cost to trade. I honestly don't know what the Rams would ask for in a trade for Matthew Stafford. I suspect they would probably ask you for a number one. If not this year, certainly next year as a starting point. And they're probably going to want another pick or two for sure. So what you'd have to figure out is there a combination? Like when the Jets made the deal with Green Bay for Aaron Rodgers, right? The Jets wound up shipping, I believe, 5 picks to the Packers. They got back Aaron Rodgers and 2 picks because they were about flopping rounds in addition to the extra selections that the Jets were sending to Green Bay. So, Aiden, that's a very complex question. I truly have no idea what the Rams would want in terms of trade value for a Matthew Stafford, but I would suspect that they're going to want at least one of your ones from the next 2 years. Maybe they'd settle for a 2. I don't know the answer to that. But if you're asking me if I were Team X, would I at least try to get into that conversation? Absolutely, positively, yes. I do think that Matthew Stafford is an outstanding with a capital O solution for a team in big-time need of a veteran quarterback who has won a bunch of games in this league. Michael Drunowski says hello, and I say hi to you. Who was your choice at the number 3 draft pick, he says. He says, dress Travis Hunter. If you've listened to any of my shows, you know how I feel about Travis Hunter. I would very much make him my top priority with the 3rd overall pick in this draft. But again, Michael, as I've said on many shows, not just this one, but also on the Big Blue Kickoff Live show, free agency is going to be much more, free agency and the draft, the trade market, let me correct myself. Free agency and the trade market is going to be much more impactful, okay? Much more impactful on the New York Giants in 2025 than that number 3 draft pick. I promise you that. Okay? And it's going to be much more impactful on the NFL's quarterback landscape than this rookie quarterback class in the draft. Just think about the guys we're talking about who are potentially on the move. Carr, Cousins, Stafford. I mean, we're talking about some names now, okay? And I don't mind telling you, I think there's at least another 1 or 2 big-time veteran quarterbacks who could also be on the move. Not just the ones that we've all heard about. But that's kind of like rumblings behind the curtain and underneath the ground that are going around the NFL. Once the Giants settle that, by the way, Michael, once the Giants get through the next month, the trade period, the free agency period, then we can talk more about what they're going to do in the draft. Okay? Because it's going to have a significant impact. Either what picks do they still have if they make a trade? Okay? They may not even have that number 3 pick if they wind up making a blockbuster trade. So, personally, I think it's more interesting to talk about what's going to happen in the next month than talking about the draft, at least as far as the Giants are concerned. That's just an opinion. You don't have to share that. But in terms of Travis Hunter, oh yeah, I think you should be ecstatic if the Giants draft Travis Hunter with the 3rd overall pick in this draft. Isaac says we need cachet in the division. Stafford would give us instant credibility. Benjamin Singer has nominations for the free agent list. So let me get off of that for a second. Just see if we can get to a couple of other items here on the chat, and then I want to get back to our list. There's Dan Barnett, Benjamin Singer. You guys got some guys for the list. James O'Keefe has some guys for the list. All right, let me just get a couple of more chat items up, and then we're going to go back to the list. Again, number 10 was Michael Barrow. Timothy Menace, Paul, how are we going to fix the leaky run defense? This problem has been too long since we've even been average. Timothy, the defensive tackle spot in this draft is the deepest position. The deepest. Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network says that there are more than 24 defensive tackles in this draft who are capable of playing in the National Football League. And most of them could even potentially be starters in the league. That's how deep this draft is for defensive tackles. And Timothy, my favorite defensive tackle, and I think most people agree, it's Mason Graham from Michigan. I can't help but drool when I look at this guy's tape. I can't even imagine how awesome he would look next to Dexter Lawrence. But here's the thing. In the full context of where the Giants are going to be, they could probably grab a terrific defensive tackle right at the top of the 2nd round. It's going to hurt every team to pass on Graham. Okay? Every team that passes on Mason Graham is going to be sorry, because he is going to be an absolute stud in this league for years. Okay? That's why it's so hard for me not to take him at 3. Here's the only way I would. If Hunter and Abdul Carter go 1 and 2, or it's Carter and Hunter 1 and 2, at pick number 3, I'm running that card up for Mason Graham. That's the only way that I would take him, because it would be very hard for me to pass on Travis Hunter at 3 if he was there. And it would probably be very hard for me to pass on Carter if he is there at number 3 as well, knowing that there are so many other defensive tackles that have such high grades that will be taken during the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th rounds. But if those 2 position guys are gone 1 and 2, I would have no trouble taking Mason Graham with the 3rd overall pick in this draft. Like I say, any team that passes on Mason Graham better be 150% sure that the guy they take is going to be terrific. Otherwise, they will rue the day that they pass on Mason Graham. All right. There are also a few defensive tackles that are going to be in free agency too, Timothy. So here's what I'm telling you. The Giants will enhance their defensive tackle spot one way or another over the course of the next 3 months. Okay? It will be a lot better than what it is now. That's going to happen. There's plenty of options available. Okay. Aiden wants to go to the quarterback thing. In regards to my last comment, I agree with you. Not picking a quarterback in the 1st round. It is just a Packers thing if you're going to go multiple years and still pick a quarterback in round 1. Laugh out loud. Okay, no problem. Okay, Danny Judge Ghost. This organization really gave Daniel Jones 5 years. How does this happen? How is to blame? Well, you've been on the show many times before, Danny. You have this proclivity to just continue to pick away at Daniel Jones, and quite frankly, I'm not going to call on you anymore if you keep doing it, because I've already been through it before. I've explained it to you numerous times. It was the sensational playoff game, specifically against Minnesota, that prompted the Giants to do what they did and to give him the extension. They were smart enough to have somewhat of a digestible out after this season, and they should be given credit for that, because they had to execute the out, and that's all there is to it. But thanks for chiming in. Christopher Webb. Hey, how you doing, my man? I'm doing okay. We love Christopher Webb because he's one of the guys who always comes through with an audio call for us on most of the shows. Always appreciate those. Yes, sir. Hope the same for you. I'm doing okay. Family's okay. Still a lot of college basketball left that I gotta work as well. But always have some time to talk Giants football. Gary Gaston says, P-Dot, if we get Stafford, are you good with Abdul Carter at 3, or do you still want Hunter? If Hunter's there at 3, I'm taking Hunter. But if Hunter is gone and it's between Carter and Graham, I have been convinced, simply because of the tremendous depth at defensive tackle and in free agency, I would probably go to Abdul Carter, and it would greatly pain me to pass on Mason Graham. As I said just a few minutes ago, if Hunter and Carter are gone, I'm taking Graham. Otherwise, I'm going to have to pass on him, and it's going to hurt. It would hurt a lot. I think that much of him. But I do think that Hunter is a generational pick at corner. You cannot, it's another premier position. You cannot pass on him. And Carter is by far the best blue chip pass rusher in this draft, has can't miss all over him. And you can never have enough pass rushers. So, once again, circumstances there, because I believe that Azeez Ojulari is going to leave the Giants as a free agent. So now you're going to be dealing with Brian Burns, who's terrific. But Kayvon Thibodeau, because of injuries or what have you, has not fully lived up to his potential yet. So it would probably behoove the Giants, if they could add an edge rusher at some point in this draft, to do so. And this guy is an absolute blue chip. So I've kind of been convinced now that if it was Carter or Mason Graham at number 3, given that Hunter would already be gone, I would take Abdul Carter. Okay. What do we have here? Isaac says, 3rd round pick, not getting a 1st or 2nd. Oh, so you want to make a deal for Stafford and you don't want to give up a 1 or a 2. Well, you could try not to do that. I'm sure the Rams are going to argue with you. You got to see what you can do. You may wind up somewhere in that permutation, flopping a pick within a round or a conditional. You know, if the Giants make the playoffs, or if the Giants go 2 rounds, or if the Giants are over 500, the pick becomes conditional and moves up 1. You could always do one of those, Isaac. All right. Well, let's go to our phones. We have a video call from my man, Chris Webb. He's a good man. He's always joining the program, and I love what he does. So we're going to do it right here. There you go.
Hey, P-Dot, how you doing?
How are you?
Hanging in there. Really sad.
I see you got Mason Graham at 3 right here. I see you messaged me that before you came on the video call.
Let's build the trenches, man. After seeing that Super Bowl, I don't know how you can't look at the game and look at how the Giants have played the past decade and not say we got to get the trenches right on both sides, because it's the reason we look so far off in the division, especially versus Dallas and Philly. I wanted to ask you.
Here's the thing. You know how much I love Mason Graham. I've made that.
I know at 3, the corner could be prioritized as well, and Abdul Carter could be prioritized over him. I understand that.
Yeah.
I guess my question, outside of those 3 picks, what are 3 moves in the draft or free agency that ultimately would catapult this team to being competitive in the NFC East and in the NFC next year? Or do you think it's really a 2-3 year project?
Well, let me give you this, okay? I do believe this team, in my opinion, knowing that the owner said his patience is very thin, and he has to feel a lot better this time next year in January about his team. I translate that into, you better be winning at least a half a dozen games, if not more. Mm-hmm. I don't think a 3 or 4 win season. It would be a very unique set of circumstances, okay, that a 3 or 4 win season is going to be okay. There would have to be some very unique circumstances for that to be acceptable. I don't see how it would be, okay? So I'm after whatever plan is going to get these guys hovering at 500, whether it's an 8-9 record or 9-8 record. I think you got to get as close to that line to have a chance to keep this thing intact. They're gonna have to show you they're going in the right direction. You agree?
Right. Okay. I think you hit it on the head. Is keep this thing rolling. Is how long can we have consistency within the coaching staff and the front office so we can continue to build that identity and that culture that we've been looking for to ultimately have long-term success?
No question. All right. So here are a few guys. All right. Here's the thing about defensive tackle, and I'm with you. You know how I feel about the trenches. I'm an old school guy. Football 101. You've got to have the trenches. And I believe because of the depth of defensive tackle, let me give you a few names. We know about Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. Some people think he's going to be closer to the middle of the first round. Some people think later
Top
first
20.
round. Believe it or not, I've even heard some draft people say start of the second round. Could you imagine getting him at the top of the second round?
That'd be
I'd be
amazing.
good with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Derek Harmon from Oregon. Another stud defensive tackle. Probably right on the cusp, end of the first round, early second round. Alfred Collins out of Texas. He's more of a second round guy, probably later in the second round. We know about Kenneth Grant, the other Michigan defensive tackle. I think he's probably borderline, end of the first round, start of the second round. Some people think he could move up a little bit higher in the first round too. So there's going to be plenty of these guys taken. And if you were to believe the draft makes that it's the deepest defensive tackle draft, well, to be honest with you, C-Web, that's kind of what swung me that I could pass on Graham at 3 because there's so much talent available. You know, that's where the context comes into play for me.
How do you feel about this offensive line right now, and what moves would you be making to solidify and kind of grow that consistency with that unit?
I would, if I were the Giants, I would like to add 2 pieces to the offensive line. I would like to add competition at tackle, specifically the swing tackle. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because Neal, who I think had a decent second half of the season, I think he's on the way back, but I can't count on that. So I would like to add a tackle. I would like to add a guard. Now, guards that are going to be free agents. If you're looking just to buy yourself a year, there's Fries from the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
There's Zeitler. Right? You remember Kevin Zeitler?
Former Giant.
Still playing
Still
well.
can play.
Still can
How
play.
old is he right now? 32, 33?
I want to say it could be 35 now.
Oh, wow.
But he's still playing well. Look what he just did for the Lions. Again, and offensive linemen can play effectively to their 38, 39, 40 years old.
40. Yeah. We saw Jason Peters play until he was 40.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you could go there. You could go, and this is if you didn't want to go draft. I'd like to see them go draft, but if you didn't want to, and you decided, you know what, we're going to save our draft capital for other things. What about calling up Zach Martin? Dallas can't keep him.
Yeah.
They're already $3 million over the cap. They're going to be decimated by salary cap problems.
I guess that's where the whole point of you can't push the buck down the line forever. You eventually have to
pay. The credit card company comes for you, C-Web.
Yeah.
They come for you with interest, by the way. So there are some veterans, along the offensive line. If you're just looking to maybe,
buy
improve
time
yourself for a year or two, if you want to go that way. Offensive line, though, is also a solid position in the draft. So I'm all with you. I'd like to pick up 2 offensive linemen somehow, some way, and I'd like to pick up 2 defensive tackles somehow, some way. Now, I mentioned today, I believe, if you didn't want to, and with so many defensive tackles in the draft, I'm inclined to see if I might be able to draft 2. But if you didn't want to do that, what if I said to you, B.J. Hill is a pending free agent from the Bengals. Would you be adverse to
Sign him
giving
right
him a
now.
phone call?
Sign him right now, please.
You take him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty good player.
He improves our defensive line immediately.
And we know he could take New York because he was a heck of a teammate when he was here.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still got a lot of tread on his tire. He's not too old.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I happen to be a huge fan of Milton Williams. When he came out of school, I don't know how long you've been following me, but I was a big Milton Williams fan coming out of school. And I was crushed when the Eagles picked him because I just knew he was going to be really good. And of course, now he blossomed in you know,
he's going to get paid.
And now he's going to want to get paid. His first couple years with the Eagles, he didn't do very much. Of course, he was buried. He didn't get a ton of playing time. But then when he did play, he didn't do very much. This year, he broke out. I'm a huge Milton Williams fan. Always have been.
Yeah.
And that would be, you know, that's going to cost some money.
We'll love to see that happen for the Giants with players of guys eventually breaking out and developing.
No doubt.
Something that we haven't seen a lot of on our team.
So, you know, if you really wanted to go high-priced defensive tackle, if you really thought that it was so important to you that you had to get someone for sure, you know, before you get to the draft, Milton Williams is going to be very high on my list.
How much would B.J. Hill cost us, you think?
Let's take a look
15,
at over the cap.
18?
Over the cap, they have a lot of cost estimates for what it may cost you to get a player. B.J. Hill, they're valuating him at about $9 a year. That's what they're looking at. He's only 30 years old.
Oh, that's great.
He's got tread.
Yeah.
He's got tread left.
Another 5 years at least.
Old.
Yeah.
So, you know, he would certainly intrigue me. I mentioned that earlier today on Big Blue Kickoff. So now, one of the other things I've said, C-Web, as well, I've said this numerous times, and this goes back a couple of months. I would entertain offers for the third pick. I've said that too.
To trade down.
Trade down. I go as far as 6 to the Raiders, trying to see if I could get them to pop up and take one of the quarterbacks. Okay, that would be the bait, is that one of those quarterbacks is going to have to be there at 3. Try to get the Raiders to bite. You know, throw that worm into the water and say, hey, there's a quarterback dangling here. Why don't you come and bite this hook? And I would try to trade down with the Raiders, and I would want a 1 next year. And I've been stuck on taking a 1 and a 2, but they probably won't give me that. I might have to just settle for a 1 and a 3.
A 3 this year.
Well, could be a 3 this year, could be a 3 next year. I wouldn't necessarily be too petty about what year it's going to be, but I would want probably a 3. If it was next year's 3, what I might do is tell them if that rookie quarterback you pick at number 3 starts all season for you, I might have to make that a conditional and it bumps up to a 2. You see? Because, see, here's my thinking. If you trade down from 3 to 6, you're not really moving all that far in terms of real estate. But if you get the extra pick, the extra 1 next year, and preferably the extra at least the 3 next year, it now gives me extra draft capital in 2026 in case I need to make a trade to move up next year.
For a quarterback.
Potentially. You see, not every move is about what's apparent or what you can see in front of you.
Now. Yeah.
Some moves have to be the first of a second move. You have to look, it's kind of like playing chess or playing checkers. You have to anticipate, if I make this move, Is this just a dead-end move for today, and that's all there is to it? Or is this a move that opens up another potential move down the line if I need to go there?
Same
That's
page.
the key. And that's why, me moving out of 3 to maybe 6, that could give me a whole lot more flexibility in 2026. And that may be incredibly valuable to me.
Looking at the roster, right?
Might be more valuable than taking a guy this year.
I'm with you. Looking at the roster right now, who would you say is at risk from like cutting the fat this year of guys potentially to be cut? Or who do you think will move off of?
For the Giants? Well, their list of free agents, I have that. I think it's in the other room. I have their list of unrestricted free agents. They've got about $43 million in cap room as it stands now. If they need to make more cap room, they could do a few renegotiations with guys like Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas, Brian Burns. They've got a few guys they could do some things with if they were desperate to get more money. So they've got the cap room to spend what they probably need to spend to get a couple of high-profile players. Those are guys that you could talk about in terms of redoing deals if you really wanted to. Of course, you'd rather not, but if you had to. In terms of the free agents who are going away, I fear that Darius Slayton's going to get a really good offer from a team that is more pass-oriented, that throws a lot more deep balls, that will be in a dome or be in a nice warm weather climate. And I think they're going to value him a lot more than what he's been with the Giants. And he's going to get a sweet offer, and I think he's gonna go. I'm a big Darius Slayton fan. I think he's been very underrated and to some degree certainly underutilized. But that's because the Giants' offense has been so dysfunctional. I'd love to see him stay. He's a great teammate. The Giants press corps voted him the George Young Good Guy Award winner this year because he's so incredibly professional and cooperative with the media. Nobody wants Darius Slayton to leave. But I think he's going to get a sweet offer from a team that's going to want to say, hey, you know what? This guy could really do some stuff for us, and we got big plans to throw the ball downfield for him. I think he's the biggest name that may wind up getting wooed elsewhere. If that, I don't know if that's the question you were trying to ask.
Yeah, I also see Pinnock as a free agent as well as
Pinnock is the biggest name free agent on defense.
Yeah, defense.
I don't necessarily think he's going to go anywhere, though. I would suspect they got a better chance of keeping him than they do Slayton. I mean, do you still consider Isaiah Simmons a name after he's underachieved for so long? Probably not.
No,
he only signed a one-year deal this year. That's also another mystery to me. I don't think he's still been used properly. I think he's got a lot more to offer. And quite honestly, I think he's going to wind up going somewhere too. But at the moment, he cannot be considered a high priority free agent anymore because his career has not lived up to its billing.
Right. What do you think about Azeez and what the Giants should do with Azeez?
I said just before you came on that I don't think Azeez Ojulari is going to come back.
Yeah.
I think somebody out there is going to say, hey,
there's value in this kid.
There's value here. And I think the Giants think value in him too. He can
resurrect his career.
Here's the problem with Ojulari. Because he's lacked durability, his production and his efficiency is actually good. For the amount of plays and snaps he plays, he gives you something. He's a good player. He's a talented player and a really good guy. But it seems to me that maybe his best role is on a team where he is the third pass rusher and he doesn't have to play too much because when he does, he tends to get injured. I mean, think about what happened with the Giants this year, right? Thibodeau breaks his hand, all right, breaks his wrist, goes out of the lineup. Ojulari gets inserted as the starter, and he's playing great. He's doing really, really well, and everyone's like, "Well, look at this. He's blossoming. He's busting through. This is the guy that the Giants wanted and needed." And then what happens? He's playing full-time snaps, and then he gets hurt again.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably better suited on a team where he can be a part-time player, not take on so much of the load, and physically stay in the lineup. And, you know,
is he a true starter or is he a role player?
I think he's probably more of a role player because of the durability issue.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're the Giants, you're going to look at him and say, this durability issue has devalued your number for us. But another team that already has some room and already has two bona fide pass rushers, they'll probably say, you know what? We'll take a shot at you. We'll give you a little more money than what the Giants are willing to do, and we'll take a shot. And I think old Azeez Ojulari is going to actually wind up getting a good offer from another team, and he's going to wind up doing well. And I wish him well. Again, I think he's a great dude, and I like him as a player. But the durability factor with the Giants, they're not in a position anymore where they can really afford not to have durability. I mean, if now Burns played hurt all season, but he got through it.
Mm-hmm.
Thibodeau didn't. And now Ojulari was forced to be a full-time starter, and he got hurt again. So do you want to do that? Because you're going to have to bring Thibodeau back as a starter. Thibodeau is staying here as a starter. He's not a part-time player. So again, if Ojulari is the third swing rusher, so to speak, he's got to be able to give you productive snaps and stay on the field. And then if one of those guys goes down, you have to know you can put him in the starting lineup for X number of games, and he's going to produce at that level. Well, when they gave him that chance to do it this year, he got hurt again. I think that puts him, in a very, very smoky category for the Giants. I think someone else is going to say, all right, come on over here. We see your potential. We see your efficiency. We know that when you do play, you're really good. We'll give you some more cash. Come on over here. And I think he's going to get wooed somewhere.
Agree. Cool. I'm good if you're good, Paul.
I appreciate you, man.
You too, man. Be good.
Thanks for calling again. Take care.
See ya.
Catch you soon. All right, C. Webb, always one of our favorites on the program. So glad to have him. Boy, a whole bunch of calls here. So, Tudo, I didn't see you with the star before. There's my man Tudo again. Oh, massive salute and respect to all diehard Giants fans. He says across the pond, greetings from our entire Italian national rugby team in Italy. Forget about it. You're the man, Tudo. I got so tied up there taking that call that I didn't see that you would hit us up. And a big thanks again to Tudo for being one of our starred super chat people. Always generous on the program. So thank you, Tudo. I feel bad sometimes I don't get to those starred responses as quickly as I should. All right. Let me go through some more of our Giants top 10 free agents, veteran free agents in the salary cap era. Let me get through this before I get back to the chats, because if I keep going with the chats, I'm never going to get through to this list. And that was really supposed to be the kickoff point to our program today. So let me do that. I go back to, I believe, Benjamin Singer is as far back as I went with somebody who was still trying to get on the list here. So Benjamin says, nominations for the free agent list: Kareem McKenzie, Sean O'Hara, Kerry Collins, Fred Robbins, Jeff Fiegels, Graham Gano, Lawrence Tynes, Steve Weatherford. Lawrence Tynes was acquired through trade with the Kansas City Chiefs, so he does not qualify. Otherwise, all of the other guys on your list actually do qualify. Now, whether or not they made the list, that remains to be seen. For those of you who have joined us late, and I'm going to knock off a few of these names right now because, like I said, I get to these chats and you guys take me off on a tangent, and then I get lost for about a half hour. Okay? Dan Marnay says Plaxico Burress. Yes, he does qualify for the list, and he did make it. James O'Keefe says Lomas Brown and Dusty Ziegler. They did not make the list because they don't qualify. Lomas Brown and Dusty Ziegler were 2 years with the Giants. They did not meet the minimum 4 years as a starter, so they do not qualify. Scott Young says, I think Kareem McKenzie was a good free agent signing. No question about it. And I'll give you a hint. He's going to make the list. All right. Let's see. All right. That's it for some of these quickies here. So let's go to the list. All right. Take that off. All right, here we go. So we told you that number 10 was Michael Barrow, Giants linebacker. Number 9, offensive lineman Ron Stone. Now, Michael Barrow, by the way, was signed from the Carolina Panthers. Ron Stone was signed off of the Dallas Cowboys. Spent 6 years as a starter at guard for the Giants. Twice to the playoffs. Twice went to the Pro Bowl. And also got an NFC championship ring with the New York Giants. Ron Stone is number 9 on my list of top 10 all-time veteran free agent signings by the Giants in the salary cap era. Number 8, punter Jeff Fiegels. 7 years as a starter. 4 different trips to the playoffs, 1 Pro Bowl, and 1 Super Bowl ring for the 2007 season. Number 7, safety Antrell Roll. Fiegels, of course, came from the Cardinals. I think Cardinals was Seattle when he got here. I think it was Seattle when he finally got here. I apologize. I'm getting a little confused right now. I didn't write where they signed him from. I did not put that in their one-line bio. Antrell Roll was with the Cardinals. He's number 7 on the list. 5 years as a starter, 1 playoff appearance, 1 Super Bowl championship, and 2 Pro Bowls. Number 6, quarterback Kerry Collins. 4.5 years as a starter, 2 years in the playoffs, and 1 NFC championship, went to Super Bowl 35 and lost to the Ravens. Collins had been with the Panthers and the Saints before he landed with the Giants. So that brings us to the top 5. Now, before I give you the top 5, let me give you the 12 players who qualified for the list who just didn't make the top 10. Kevin Booth, offensive lineman, spent 7 years with the New York Giants after he was thrown onto the scrap heap by the Raiders. Only started for 2.5 years, but because of his 7-year tenure, I allowed him to qualify. He was on 3 Giants playoff teams and captured 2 Super Bowl rings with the Giants, including the 2011 season, the second win against the New England Patriots, when in that season, he started games at center when David Boss had a concussion, and then moved to left guard when left guard David Deal had to move out to left tackle when Will Beatty got hurt. And during the playoffs and in the Super Bowl, Kevin Booth was the Giants' starting left guard for the second Super Bowl against the New England Patriots. And so Kevin Booth was a very close member of the top 10, but he did not make it. Brad DeLuiso, kicker from Denver, 8 years with the Giants. For 7.5 years, he was their starting place kicker. 3 playoff trips, 1 NFC championship ring, again lost to the Ravens in Super Bowl 35. Michael Boley, linebacker with the Atlanta Falcons, 4 years as a starter, 1 playoff trip, 1 Super Bowl ring with the 2011 Giants that beat the Patriots in the rematch. Chris Canty, defensive tackle, 4 years as a Giants starter, 1 playoff trip, 1 Super Bowl ring. Again, the 2011 season, he was signed from the Dallas Cowboys. Punter Steve Weatherford was signed off the Jets, 4 years as a starter, 1 playoff trip, 1 Super Bowl ring, the 2011 season. Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie, 4 years as a starter with the Giants, 1 playoff trip, 1 Pro Bowl, plus 1 NFL All-Pro selection. Jackrabbit Janoris Jenkins, corner, signed off the Rams. DRC was with the Broncos. Jackrabbit, 4 years as a starter, 1 playoff trip, 1 Pro Bowl, plus 1 All-Pro selection. Defensive lineman Robert Harris played defensive tackle for the Giants. 4.5 years as a starter, made 1 playoff trip. Kicker Graham Gano. Harris was with the Vikings. Graham Gano from the Panthers. 5 years as a starter. 5 years with the Giants. 3 years as a starter, then 2.5 years as their starting kicker, 1 playoff trip. Fullback Jim Finn from Bergen County's Bergen Catholic High School. Came from the Colts. 4 years as a starter. He was the lead blocking back for Tiki Barber. Made 2 playoff trips with the Giants in those 4 years. Guard John Jerry, 3.5 years as a starter, made 1 playoff trip with the Giants. He came from the Dolphins. And Riley Dixon, punter, came from the Broncos, had 4 years as a starter, but did not make any playoffs or any all-star teams. Those 12 players did not make my list of the top 10, but did qualify under the parameters that I set, which meant, once again, for those of you who joined us late, veteran free agents who signed with the Giants and spent the better part of 4 full seasons, at least 4 full seasons, the better part of 4 full seasons as a starter with the team. We go back to the top 5 in reverse order. Wide receiver, Plexico Burress. 3.5 years as a starter. They went to the playoffs every year. And they got a Super Bowl ring when he made that catch in the end zone to beat the Patriots in Super Bowl 42. Number 4, defensive tackle Fred Robbins came over from the Minnesota Vikings and spent 6 full years as a starting defensive lineman for the Giants, went to the playoffs 3 times, and got a Super Bowl ring in the 2007 Super Bowl. Number 3, linebacker Antonio Pierce. Came over from the Redskins, 5 years as a starter, 3 playoff trips, and the Super Bowl ring in Super Bowl 42. Number 2, Sean O'Hara, center by way of Rutgers and the Cleveland Browns, spent 7 years as a starting offensive lineman for the Giants, 4 different playoff trips, 3 Pro Bowls, and 1 Super Bowl ring in Super Bowl 42. And number 1, the greatest veteran free agent signing by the Giants during the salary cap era, right tackle Kareem McKenzie, 7 years as a starter, came over from the Jets, 5 playoff trips, and 2 Super Bowl rings, 2007 and 2011. So there you go. The top 10 all-time New York Giants veteran free agent starters since the salary cap era began in the 1994 NFL regular season. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Perhaps you had some different candidates. Perhaps you thought some of the 12 who were on the ballot but did not make my 10, maybe you thought they should have. Could certainly appreciate what those guys did, especially those folks who won Super Bowls. Kevin Booth, the only one who didn't make my top 10, who won 2 Super Bowl rings, and he did start for one of those Lombardi trophies. So, anyway, there's my list. Now we go back to the chats, the phone calls, and the video calls, as we are now a quarter after 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We are an hour and 15 minutes or so into today's program. And again, I'll take this show 90 minutes. If at 9:30 Eastern Time you guys still want to keep it going, I'll be glad to stay with you. Giants Carb Crush. Rams GM Les Snead and GM Joe Shane, conversations at the scouting combine will be interesting to watch. Last 2 seasons, Shane has pulled off 2 huge trades with Darren Waller and Brian Burns. Something to keep an eye on. Giants Carb Crush, this is why I said earlier in the program, and I've been saying now for the last week or two, free agency and trades. That's where the Giants are going to significantly make waves in the next month ahead of the draft and impact the direction of their 2025 season. I feel strongly about that. And obviously you do too. James O'Keefe says, shades of Reggie White, who could have been a Giant. Instead, we draft Timmerman, who refused to play for the Giants. Gary Zimmerman was the offensive tackle who the Giants drafted. He was traded because he did refuse to play for the Giants to the Minnesota Vikings and became a long-time starting star offensive tackle for them. I'm not sure I understand the whole Reggie White thing, though. Let me just see here. I don't remember Reggie White visiting the Giants on his free agent tour. James, I'm going to take a look here because I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. Let me see here. No, I certainly don't remember that. I don't remember Reggie White visiting the Giants on his free agent tour. Remember, he kept saying he was going to go where God wanted him to play. And I don't think God liked the mosquitoes and the swampland in East Rutherford. So Reggie White never visited the Giants as far as I knew. But in any event, so But that's who you're talking about, not Timmerman. It's Gary Zimmerman, of course, who the Giants traded to the Minnesota Vikings, and then he wound up getting later on dealt to the Denver Broncos. Had a hell of a career. Anyway. All right. Let's see here. Gary Gaston says Trey Smith and DJ Reed are at the top of his free agent list. Trey Smith, the guard from the Kansas City Chiefs, who had a very difficult time in the Super Bowl. DJ Reed, the cornerback from the Jets, who has a voidable year on his deal and is expected to execute it and become a free agent. Reed and Shavarius Ward are the two premier corners that are expected to be available in free agency this year, and they will cost you a very, very pretty penny. I think a little bit less expensive, and a guy I would probably be interested in if you wanted to purchase a veteran free agent corner would be Carlton Davis. He has had some injury issues. That's true. So he probably would come in a little cheaper than Reed and Ward. But he is a very feisty corner, also plays well against the run, and has a real gritty attitude about him. And I think that's the kind of guy who, could certainly draw interest. He will cost some money too. I don't think he would cost as much as Reed or Ward would. So, Gary, that's my thought on that. In terms of Trey Smith, I don't know. Look, the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line got beaten up like wet tissue paper in Sunday's Super Bowl. And Trey Smith did not have a good day. Now, he got beaten up by the Philadelphia Eagles, a team you're trying to catch. Does that make you feel good about wanting to go after him? I mean, I think you may want to consider that. The other thing you'd want to consider is he's also younger and is going to want a whole lot of money. I think the interesting part when Giants co-owner John Mara spoke to the media at the end of the year, he listed 3 priorities that he wanted to see improved on the roster. He said they obviously have to take care of a quarterback through free agency, trade, or draft. We get that. 3-pronged approach. He said he wanted the defense to be improved. He was tired of seeing teams run up and down and through the defense. Well, that's pretty obvious. And we know that defensive tackle will be addressed. And then he also said he wanted to see more depth on the offensive line. That was the third of his 3 priorities. I found it interesting that he said depth on the offensive line. Because if you watch the Giants' offensive line, when they started the season last year, they actually played pretty well. The starting 5 that they had, things started to go south after Andrew Thomas got hurt once again. So I think the idea here is in acquiring offensive line help for this team, it's going to be to either get an older, more established player who can help with depth and potentially start for a year or two, or acquire young, draftable, tough, stud offensive linemen who you want to develop for the long term. I don't know that signing an offensive lineman in his prime, like a Trey Smith, is necessarily the type of offensive lineman that they are going to want to entertain. I just don't know if that fits the plan. Now, let me see here about Trey Smith, who's 26 years old and has been in the league for 4 years. So again, he's going to the prime of his career. Valuation, according to Over the Cap, They got him at 11.5 a year. I doubt that he goes for anything in that neighborhood because he is the premier offensive lineman in free agency with the level of experience and the overall quality of play that he's put forth. I expect Trey Smith to have a very exaggerated contract that's going to be well over $11.5 million a year. I expect it to be well over that. So I just don't know if, again, listening to John Mara's words very specifically, he said offensive line depth. Trey Smith is not depth. He's a guy in his prime. He's a starter in his prime. I don't know that that's what they're looking for. But I agree. They're obviously looking for offensive line. And they do need help. Okay. Let's see what we have here. Oh, somebody in the private chat, a guy named Joe says, what about Jameis Winston? He's looking at a possible free agent quarterback. Well, Joe, I got to be honest with you. If you look at Jameis Winston's career, it has been littered with turnovers. Not just 1 or 2 years. Yeah, we all know about he's the only quarterback ever to throw at least 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in one season. We all know that stat. It's a trivia question that everybody asks at every pub and sports bar in the country. Trouble is, the turnovers have plagued him like all the time throughout his entire career. If I were Team X, I'm sorry. I would not be having that phone call. That just would not work for me in any way, shape, or form. All right. James O'Keefe says, in reference to drafting over a player, we passed on Reggie White for Zimmerman, who Parcells preferred. Oh, all right. So you weren't talking about Reggie White's free agency tour. Okay, but here's the thing. Gary Zimmerman played for the Los Angeles Express in the USFL. Reggie White played defensive end for the Memphis Showboats of the USFL. So the Giants got Zimmerman in the USFL dispersal draft and then turned him into draft picks, which, by the way, turned out to be second-round picks. Remember Mark Collins? Remember Eric Howard? Remember Pepper Johnson? They did real well on that trade with the draft collateral that they got for Zimmerman. Let me look at the USFL dispersal draft and see exactly where Reggie White went. Because quite frankly, even though I covered the New Jersey Generals for 3 years, in 83, 84, and 85, the 3 years that the league was in existence, and I was very much aware of that league. I covered all the New Jersey Generals home games at the old Giants Stadium. I was very much into that league, and I thought it was an outstanding league, and I loved it, and I wish that it was still around because it wasn't like the garbage spring leagues we have today. It was a legit league. The problem, obviously, was they ran into financial issues, and they wound up having to fold when Donald Trump really tried to force people's hands and see if he could get them to move to the fall because he was hoping he could merge the Generals into the NFL. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let me see if I can go back and look for the USFL dispersal draft and see exactly where. Let's see. USFL dispersal draft. That would be 1986, I believe, because the USFL went 80. 83, 84, and 85. In 86, the league was gone. So let me see here. NFL. Let's take a look here. All right. 1986. Okay. Draft was in 84. Okay. All right. So let's go back here, take a glance. USFL 1984 draft, NFL. See if we can find that draft. I'm trying to find that draft. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. Here we go. NFL supplemental draft, 1984. The league was in existence for 83, 84, and 85, as I recall. But okay, here we go. All right. James, you are correct. The Giants took Gary Zimmerman with the third pick of the USFL players draft that the NFL took in 1984. These players were drafted with future rights because in case that league were to go away. Number 1 pick was Steve Young by Tampa Bay. Houston took running back Mike Rozier. Giants took Gary Zimmerman. And Philadelphia took Reggie White with the 4th pick in the NFL's USFL rights draft. So, okay. Now, James, I will tell you this, and I'm not joking. I mean, I was covering the Giants then, and I don't ever remember Bill Parcells objecting to Reggie White and insisting that they draft Gary Zimmerman. I don't know if you have a source on that, if you have it from a book or if you have it from an article. I don't honestly remember that. It was the second year that I was on the Giants beat covering the team, and I do not remember there being an incident where Parcells did not want Reggie White and insisted that they take Gary Zimmerman. No, I do not remember that. So if you have something that's printed that indicates that's true, then we'll chalk it up as they miss Reggie White. But again, Gary Zimmerman, I want to quote this exactly, because if we're going to be into this conversation about Giants missing out, I want to be very clear what they got. Okay? Giants traded Zimmerman to the Vikings, and they got 2 second-round picks. Okay? They wound up becoming Mark Collins, who we know was dynamite for the team and helped them win 2 Super Bowls. Zimmerman, of course, again, I'm not saying that Zimmerman didn't turn out to be great, but you were right. He did not want to play in New York. That happens to be true. I can tell you that. He was with the USFL's Los Angeles Express. The Giants had his rights. The league folded. He did not want to play here. He refused, so they had to deal him. Let's see here. So Collins and Lasker, Greg Lasker, the safety, who was a special teams player, those were actually the 2 picks that they got for Zimmerman. But in the 86 draft, the New York Giants, as I recall, I want to make sure I got this right too. The 86 draft was an outstanding draft for the Giants. And we go back and correct. As I had said to you earlier, Mark Collins, Eric Howard, Pepper Johnson, Greg Lasker. Giants had 4 second-round picks this year in 86. So when I referred to Collins, Howard, and Pepper before, I was accurate. That was the second round in 86. I forgot Greg Lasker was the fourth second-round pick, and with the other Zimmerman selection that they got in that trade. But yeah, Zimmerman did not want to play in New York. He was totally against playing here. And so they were going to have to move him. All right. James O'Keefe says, you were saying how tough it would be to pass over a player like Graham or Carter. Yeah. Yeah, it would be. Be very, very tough. Hugely tough. But again, free agency and the trade market. I reserve the right to change my entire opinion about the direction of the draft once free agency and the trade market settles itself out, because that March is going to be so important to what the Giants will do in 2025. Hugely important. Sean Jackson says, good evening, Paul. I'm frustrated about the Eagles winning another Super Bowl and Saquon winning as an Eagle. I'm curious what's it like to be around the Giants facility following the Eagles Super Bowl victory. Well, I get it. I get it. What's it been like? Business as usual. I mean, scouts have come in. Some assistant coaches have been hired, and they're cracking the books. The rehab players who are injured are coming in for treatment, coming in for conditioning purposes, and it's business as usual. There are no long faces. There are no happy faces. Everybody is getting to work, and that's what they have to do. Remember, the Giants had a total of 7 different assistant coaches between the coordinators Bowen and Kafka, plus 5 other position assistants. They had a total of 7 who were working either the Shrine Bowl or the Senior Bowl. So these guys weren't sitting around, in their doldrums, worried about what the arch rival Philadelphia Eagles were going to do. That's not what happened here. These Giants people were hitting the pavement. If you had an opportunity to listen to our program 2 weeks ago when I talked to Emery Hunt of CBS Sports HQ, he had said that he had been to 6 different all-star events, plus 1 in Canada during the offseason. And the Giants were well represented at all 6. They weren't at the event in Canada, but they were well represented at all 6 of the all-star college events that he had been at, and said there was no question in his mind that the Giants were pounding the pavement and leaving no stone unturned to scout these players for this year. Not that they've ever not worked hard, but he said it was really obvious about the extent that they were going to track down information on players this year. So what's the facility like? It's workmanlike. That's what it's like. People are putting their feet to the grindstone. Michael Dranowski says, I'm from the Philadelphia area, and these fans are still busting on all us Giants fans about Saquon Barkley. Glad he won a ring. Well, yeah, look, again, Saquon Barkley was not going to do what he did this year if he was playing for the New York Giants. They did not have the circumstances and the environment that he had in Philadelphia, which was incredibly conducive to his success and his ability to max out on his potential. It's that simple. James O'Keefe. That's a nice second-round bunch of players in 86. Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. That was a terrific second round. I always dreamed of LT and the Minister of D on the same defense. I get that. Again, James, I go back to your comment before. You had said that Parcells wanted Zimmerman instead of Reggie White. I mean, I know Parcells really well and knew him for a long, long time really well, right during that time period. I don't ever remember him saying he wanted Zimmerman over Reggie White. So please, if you've got some evidence of that, I'd love to know about it. And I could always check with Bill myself next time I talk to him or text with him. I could, and I do appreciate it. All right, Michael, Paul, were you happy with the Giants bringing back Dable and Shane in 2025? Yeah, I think they made the right decision. I've said that many times before on this program, as well as the Big Blue Kickoff live show. I thought they made the right call. And one of the primary reasons, well, there are a couple. One is I do believe you're better off when you keep the GM and coach together. When you split them, it tends to get a little messy sometimes, especially if things aren't going well. If you split them when they're doing well because the coach decides to retire, that's one thing. But if a team's going poorly and you split them, it tends to get a little sticky because that means the team is already in quicksand. And then if they don't get out of it in that very next year, now you've got a real problem because things are disjointed and you got to figure out how to move on as an organization. So that was certainly one reason. And again, I'm not even talking about the quality of these guys as football men. I'm simply talking about philosophically the structure of what happens when you have a GM and a coach. Another very, very important box for me, if I were to make a decision like that as an owner or as a GM about the coach, it would be, do I see the players working hard at practice every day? And do I see them putting it out there on the field? It's one thing if they're not good enough. It's another thing if they flat out roll over and if there's finger pointing in the locker room, guys are cutting up and guys are just mailing it in. That's a huge box for me. I didn't see that with the Giants this year, nor did John Mara. And so philosophically speaking, again, not addressing Shane and Dable individually, but philosophically speaking, with those two boxes, the only right solution was to bring both of them back based on the evidence. K-Mac says, considering how poorly Shane is drafted in the trenches, he says Thibodeau, Neal, Azudu, Davidson, McKeithen, Schmitz, Riley. Do you think they are addressed via free agency? Well, I disagree with you about poorly in the trenches. Kayvon Thibodeau has had some mixed results. That's not poor results. That's mixed results, partially because of a broken wrist. Evan Neal has been absolutely decimated with injuries during an inconsistent career and is now at the end of this past season when he got hurt again, but did show some signs of being on the right track. Azudu, been injured as well, but I would agree that they would like to have gotten more out of him to this point. Davidson, been injured a lot, but also has not reached his potential. So that one's fair. McKeithen got hurt, never reached his potential. So I suppose that one's fair. But again, all these guys have been hurt too. But again, did not reach his potential. Schmitz, I thought he leveled off in year two. I expected to see a big jump, and I really didn't see it. I saw some inconsistency out of him. He needs to become more consistent at a higher level. But the jury is still out because he's only been a 2-year starter. So to put him in the poorly category, I totally disagree. Jordan Riley, another guy, been here for 2 years, 7th-round draft pick, okay? And for a 7th-round draft pick, I don't think he's done poorly. You've gotten some quality snaps out of him. He's been inconsistent again. Yes, inconsistent. And quite frankly, benched earlier this year. But for a 7th-round draft pick, they've gotten some value out of him. And it remains to be seen now this summer if he can earn his way back onto the team again this fall. So I would not necessarily, given the fact that he was a 7th-rounder and has shown some flashes, I would not give him the category or tag him with the category of being poor either. So K-Mac, I'm sorry, but I disagree with your characterization of the question. So it's kind of hard to give you a good answer other than there is a tremendous amount of defensive tackle talent in this draft. I would think the Giants will draft at least one, potentially draft two. But because free agency comes first and there are some solid defensive tackles available in free agency, it would not shock me if they signed one. Obviously, price is going to be a concern. You know, you can't just go totally overboard on price on one position guy there, unless that's just going to be the one big fish that you're going to spend in free agency on. So I guess my answer is I would not be surprised if they did pick up a free agent, but then also drafted at defensive tackle. I would also not be shocked if they didn't go defensive tackle in free agency and simply went into the draft and took a couple guys there. What I don't think they'll do is sign 2 defensive tackles in free agency. That would shock me. James O'Keefe says, can't remember if I read it somewhere or saw it on a TV show, but Coach Parcells wanted O-line that year with the first pick. No, James. Oh, James, Zimmerman and White were in the USFL rights dispersal draft. Okay? They were not in the regular NFL draft. They were stars in the USFL. In '84, the NFL, realizing that there were a lot of really good players in the USFL, and they thought there was a chance the USFL might not last very long, they decided to hold a rights draft. Okay? There was a guy, a running back named Terry Kirby, who was another guy the Giants drafted in that draft as well. He never amounted to anything and didn't even play for the Giants. That's what that's about. So please, you're getting your signals mixed up on this one, James. I'm sorry, but you are, because that had nothing to do with the first round of the 1986 draft. This is we're talking about something entirely different. Let me just see here. As I recall, let's see, 1984 USFL NFL draft. Okay, here we go. That draft. Let's see. James Robinson, defensive tackle from the LA Express, was the Giants' second pick in that USFL draft. And Kirby Warren, not Terry Kirby, Kirby Warren running back from the Los Angeles Express, was the other player that the Giants picked in that draft. Yeah, so this has nothing to do with the 1986 draft other than the picks they got for Gary Zimmerman from the Vikings were in the 1986 draft. This was a rights draft of USFL players in 1984. Totally different. All right. Tim Frith 24 says, will the Giants sign Kelly, Fries, and Willis to fix their O-line? Oh, man. We're going to be going at O-line questions, I think, for the next 25 years. And by then, I might actually retire. Okay? I've only been doing this now for 42 straight seasons. I don't know if I have another 25 seasons left in me. Okay? But I bet you for each of those 25 seasons, there will be offensive line issues. Okay? It's just the way it is. I can't take it anymore. No, I could see them potentially signing one offensive lineman. Okay. But I don't think it's going to be a star offensive lineman in his prime. That's just the way I see it. It doesn't mean that I'm right. I could easily turn out to be wrong. I just don't see it. Let's see. I'm not even sure. You've got Kelly and Wills. Yeah, you've got Kelly and Wills on here. I know Fries is a free agent. And I'll be honest with you, he plays for the Colts. Does he call himself Freeze? I'm not even sure he pronounces it. And I'm being honest with you, folks. And again, I'm always honest with you. If I don't know, I'll tell you. I'm calling him Fries because it's Fries. That is the way it's spelled. That's the accurate spelling. He might call himself Freeze or Fries. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not afraid to tell you that I don't know. There were how many hundreds of players in the league? You can't know how to pronounce every single one of them all the time. All right. Offensive line. Jedrick Wills is voiding out the last year of his deal with the Browns. But at 26 years old, he's smacking his prime. So no, I don't think the Giants would go for him. That's not to say that they shouldn't. Maybe they decide that that's going to be their big ticket free agent item. I honestly don't know the answer to that. Let's see. Now, I know the Colts lineman is a free agent, so he would be available. That is true. And Kelly, let's see here. I don't see Kelly on the list of free agents. Let me see here. Yeah, I don't know who it is that you might be talking about. Okay. We go and take a good look at the internet because the internet is always very, very good to help us out. Okay, let's see here. Don't see Kelly on this list. Maybe it's just a bad list. Let's see. Oh, there he is, Ryan Kelly. He is a free agent. So you're right. I know the answer is I would not see them signing him. I think they're very, very much wanting to see a third year out of John Michael Schmitz to see if he indeed can have that breakout season in his third year and reach his full potential. So Ryan Kelly is on the list of free agents. I haven't even looked at the centers because I believe they're committed to Schmitz. I think if they're going shopping for offensive linemen, and I do think they'll add, it's going to be guards and tackles. I don't think they're going for another center. And if they do, he's simply going to be a backup to Schmitz. Sean Jackson, great to hear McKenzie got recognized as a great free agent signing. Antrell Roll was also personally one of my favorite free agent signings. Antrell appeared to be a good leader, true dog mentality. Sean Jackson, you're 100% correct. And it was very easy for me to make sure that they were in my list. Again, Kareem McKenzie was number 1. Antrell Roll was number 7. K-Mac says, thanks. I tried to answer as best as I could, K-Mac. We're all about truth here. We're about truth, we're about facts, and we're about what logically makes sense based on the evidence that I have before me from within the building. And that's the only way I can describe it. And I get it. A lot of people, have difference of opinions, and that's fine. We can all agree to disagree. Just make sure that the opinions are based on actual facts. And if you've got something that's not accurate, well, then we got to fix that first. Then you can have whatever opinion it is that you want to formulate. Aiden Fink says, don't retire. Aiden, I got a lot of years left. 25? I don't know. I don't know about 25 more. We'll see how life goes in 25 years. But I plan on going nowhere anytime soon, trust me, as I look forward to my 43rd consecutive season on the Giants beat. He says, I think you were right about when I said you should be the next GM when you questioned me and asked me how many GMs go 42 years. Aiden, that's the problem, right? GMs don't go 42 years with the same organization. Head coaches don't go 42 years with the same organization. I've had 42 years around the New York Football Giants and loved every second of it. It has been an absolute labor of love and an occupation of passion. I can't imagine doing anything else but doing what I do because I am totally invested. I am all in, and I've been a sponge around some of the greatest football minds that the modern era of the NFL has ever seen. George Young and Bill Parcells and Tom Boistier and Dan Reeves and Tom Coughlin and Ernie Accorsi. It has been, an absolute thrill. Bill Belichick, Sean Payton, John Fox, Steve Spagnuolo, Kevin Gilbride. I don't want to leave anybody out. I've learned so much from all of them. It's been the greatest education and the greatest occupation that I ever could have had. In fact, the job is even better than anything I could have dreamed of. So trust me, I'm not going to go willingly anytime soon. That's not happening in the near future, Aiden. I can promise you that. And if something should happen that changes the circumstances, well, who knows? Then you reevaluate. But I plan on doing this for quite a long time. K-Mac says, since we're going down memory lane, do you recall this being true? The Saints took Lawrence Taylor 1 overall. The Giants were going to select Freeman McNeil at 2. No. Nope. That is not accurate. My conversations with Bill Parcells were as such. If Bum Phillips had listened to his New Orleans Saints staff, K-Mac, let me tell you the story as I understand it from Giants personnel, directly from personnel with the Giants, coaching staff, front office, and scouts. Because I don't like to repeat stuff that I don't have firsthand knowledge of. And I had this conversation with Coach Parcells. Bum Phillips did not listen to his Saints people. The Giants had intel that the Saints people wanted Lawrence Taylor. He believed that the Saints desperately needed George Rogers, the running back. Okay? So he went against the advice of his football people with the Saints and took George Rogers number 1. The Giants were ecstatic because they had Lawrence Taylor at the top of their board. Bill Parcells had personally, in addition to the scouts, Bill Parcells, who was working as a Giants defensive assistant at the time, had made it very clear, because he had gone on one of the scouting missions, that this is the guy we got to get. So as Bill described it to me, the Giants draft room went absolutely crazy when Bum Phillips followed through on his decision to ignore the New Orleans football staff and take George Rogers. Had the Giants not been able to get LT because he was number 1 to the Saints, it is my belief that they would have taken Ronnie Lott. Now, let's take a look at that 1981 draft for just a moment. The 81 draft, Ronnie Lott went number 8 to the San Francisco 49ers. Freeman McNeil went to the Jets at number 3. Seattle took Kenny Easley. St. Louis took A.J. Jr. That was the Cardinals, of course. Green Bay took Rich Campbell, quarterback out of Cal. That bust. Tampa Bay took Hugh Green. And then San Francisco at number 8 took Ronnie Lott. It was my understanding that Ronnie Lott was the Giants' next favorite choice. Hope that answers your question. Aiden Fink says, good. He doesn't want me to retire. I agree. Good. Sean Jackson says, after watching this past Super Bowl, there's a part of me that definitely wouldn't mind seeing the Giants draft Carter. A D-line of Dex, Burns, Kayvon, Thibodeau, Carter, and maybe another signed or drafted defensive tackle. Man. Carter's a blue chip pass rusher. There's no question about that. Now, if he comes to the Giants as a rookie, you would think he's the 3rd pass rusher, right? And he would be used in packages at the beginning. And then also to spell Thibodeau or Burns when they needed to take a break. I don't think you'd see a heavy dose of all 3 of those guys at the same time. I just don't see how that would work. Not the way that Shane Bowen likes to use his defensive players. So they still need, in my opinion, they still need to get 2 stud down defensive linemen. And I'm not talking about tweeners, no. 2 stud defensive tackles. None of these 250-pound guys. K-Back says, wow, glad I asked. Awesome. Thanks. Sure thing. Sure thing. That, of course, this conversation about the 1981 NFL draft. All right. We've gone through 2 straight hours. I don't see any more comments in the chat. And I don't see anybody else coming in with a phone call or a video call. So it looks like we will call this one a night. Now, I will tell you this. Next weekend, we will have another show next Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're going to try to do another theme to kick off the program. And then, of course, as always, we'll get into whatever else you guys want to get to. Now, next Wednesday, today is the 12th, so that would be the 19th. Okay. So, if you've been keeping track of the NFL schedule, on Tuesday, February the 18th, is an important day for the National Football League because that is the day that, beginning at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, teams can designate their franchise tags or their transition tags. So now we actually really do kick off the first part of free agency, which is the opening of the tags. So that will be our lead conversation going into next Wednesday's show. We will see which of the top-notch free agents around the NFL are either being immediately tagged or being talked about as being tagged, who might come off the market from the anticipated free agent list, and how might that change some of the plans that the Giants may have as they try to attack the offseason. That could be a very fun show. And we hope that maybe we get ourselves a little bit of a surprise guest who's got some national perspective on some of these tags. That would be kind of fun. And of course, as always, we always like to and enjoy talking with you guys as well. So that'll do it for tonight's edition of the Big Blue Breakdown Live here on the New York Giants on SI YouTube page and media network. I'm Paul Dottino, and we will see you again next Wednesday night. Take care, everybody.